The conference room smelled like expensive leather and quiet desperation. I sat at the end of the mahogany table, watching my father-in-law adjust his Italian silk tie, completely unaware that I controlled 51% of the voting shares in the company he thought he still ran. But I'm getting ahead of myself. My name is Thomas Whitmore, and I'm 64 years old. The story I'm about to tell you spans 4 decades, and it starts in the spring of 1983 in a small town called Orangeville, about an hour north of Toronto. I was 24 then, working as a machinist at a manufacturing plant. The pay was decent, enough to cover rent on my bachelor apartment and keep my 1977 Chevy Nova running. I wasn't ambitious in the traditional sense. I showed up, did my work, went home. My coworkers thought I was boring. Maybe I was. But I was also careful, methodical, patient. I met Sarah at a community fundraiser for the local library. She was volunteering at the book sale table, her auburn hair catching the afternoon sunlight through the church basement windows. She wore a simple blue dress and white sneakers, and when she smiled at me, I felt something shift in my chest. "Looking for anything specific?" she asked. "Just browsing," I said, picking up a worn copy of something I can't even remember now. "That's a good one," she said, even though I'm pretty sure she hadn't read it. 50 cents. I gave her $1 and told her to keep the change. She laughed. Big spender. We started talking. She told me she'd just finished her degree in social work at McMaster University and was living at home while she looked for work. Her father owned a mid-sized manufacturing company in Brampton. Her mother was kind but quiet. She had a younger brother studying engineering. I didn't care about any of that. I just wanted to keep listening to her voice. We started dating that summer. Simple dates, coffee shops, walks by the Credit River, occasionally a movie at the old Majestic Theater. Sarah never seemed to mind that I couldn't afford fancy restaurants or expensive gifts. She'd pack sandwiches, and we'd drive out to the Forks of the Credit, sitting on the hood of my Nova, talking until the stars came out. Her father, Gerald Pemberton, was a different story. I met him 3 months into our relationship. Sarah invited me to Sunday dinner at their house in Caledon, a sprawling property with a circular driveway and gardens that looked like they required a full-time staff. Gerald opened the door himself. He was 52 then, tall and barrel-chested, with steel-gray hair swept back from his forehead. He looked me up and down with the same expression you'd give a door-to-door salesman. "So you're the machinist," he said. "Not a question." "A classification?" "Yes, sir. Thomas Whitmore." I extended my hand. He shook it briefly. His grip was firm but perfunctory, like he was checking a box on a list. "Gerald Pemberton. Come in." Dinner was awkward. Gerald dominated the conversation, talking about his company, Pemberton Industrial Solutions, and the challenges of managing a workforce of 300 employees. Sarah's mother, Patricia, smiled encouragingly at me, but rarely spoke. Sarah's brother, David, was home from university and seemed more interested in his roast beef than the conversation. "So, Thomas," Gerald said, cutting into his meat with surgical precision, "Sarah tells me you work at Acton Manufacturing." "Yes, sir. 5 years now. Machinist." "That's right." He nodded slowly, as if confirming something disappointing. "Honest work. Nothing wrong with honest work." The way he said it made it clear there was plenty wrong with it. "What are your plans?" he asked. "Long term, I mean. You can't work a shop floor forever." "I'm content where I am," I said. His eyebrows raised slightly. "Content. Interesting choice of words." He took a sip of wine. "Sarah's very bright, you know, top of her class. Could do anything she wants." "I know," I said. "She's remarkable." "Remarkable," he repeated, tasting the word. "Yes. I suppose the question is whether she'll have the opportunity to reach her potential, or whether she'll be held back by circumstances." Sarah's fork clinked against her plate. "Dad, I'm just making conversation, sweetheart." He smiled at her, then turned back to me. "No offense intended, Thomas. I'm simply a father who wants the best for his daughter." "None taken," I said, though we both knew that was a lie. After dinner, Sarah walked me to my car. The evening air was cool, carrying the scent of cut grass and honeysuckle. "I'm sorry about my father," she said. "He can be protective. It's all right. He loves you. He's a snob." She wrapped her arms around herself. "He thinks everyone should measure success by bank accounts and business cards." I pulled her close. "What do you think?" She looked up at me, her green eyes serious. "I think success is being happy with someone you love. Everything else is just noise." I kissed her then, and I knew I was going to marry her. What Sarah didn't know, what no one knew except my lawyer and accountant, was that I wasn't just a machinist. In 1979, when I was 20, my grandfather passed away. He'd been a quiet man, a tool and die maker who'd never owned a car newer than 10 years old or taken a vacation farther than Wasaga Beach. When his will was read, everyone was shocked to learn he'd accumulated almost $2 million through careful investments in dividend-paying stocks. He left it all to me, not my parents, not my siblings. Me, the grandson who'd spent countless Saturdays in his garage learning how machines worked, listening to his stories about the Depression and the importance of never spending what you don't have. His lawyer handed me a letter along with the inheritance papers. "Thomas," it read, "if you're reading this, I'm gone. I'm leaving you this money because I know you won't waste it. I watched you grow up, and I saw something in you that reminded me of myself. Patience. The world will try to make you rush. Don't. Money is a tool, not a trophy. Use it wisely. Make it work for you, quietly. And remember, the people who respect you for what you own aren't the people worth keeping. Love, Grandpa." I was 20 years old, suddenly wealthy, and I took his advice. I kept working at the plant. I kept driving my Nova. I kept living in my apartment, but I started learning about business. I read books on corporate finance, securities law, investment strategy. I hired a lawyer named Robert Chen and an accountant named Margaret Sullivan, both sworn to confidentiality. I set up numbered corporations to hold my investments, and I started buying shares in Pemberton Industrial Solutions. Gerald had taken his company public in 1977 to raise capital for expansion. He retained 48% of the shares. The rest were scattered among small investors who'd bought in for the dividends. Over 3 years, through various holding companies, I quietly acquired 49%. By the time I met Sarah, I was the second largest shareholder in her father's company. By the time I proposed to her in 1984, I'd purchased enough shares from retiring investors to control 51%. I never told her. We married that fall in a small ceremony at St. Andrew's Presbyterian Church in Orangeville. Gerald paid for the wedding. He was civil but cool, making it clear he thought his daughter was settling. When he toasted us at the reception, he wished us happiness despite the inevitable challenges of limited means. Sarah squeezed my hand under the table. I squeezed back. We bought a small house in Georgetown, a 3-bedroom bungalow with a postage stamp yard and a mortgage I could have paid off with a single phone call. Instead, I made the payments like everyone else. Sarah got a job with Children's Aid Society. I kept working at the plant. The dividends from my shares in Pemberton Industrial went into investment accounts Sarah never knew existed. I lived on my machinist's salary. We budgeted carefully. We clipped coupons. We saved for vacations. We were happy. Our daughter, Emma, was born in 1986. Sarah's parents came to the hospital. Patricia held the baby and cried. Gerald shook my hand and said, "Well, you've got another mouth to feed now. Hope you're ready for that." "We'll manage," I said. He smiled thinly. "I'm sure you will. Just remember, if things get tight, I can always find a position for you at Pemberton. Entry level, of course. Warehouse, maybe. Something more stable than factory work." "That's generous," I said. "But I'm happy where I am." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Suit yourself." Over the years, Gerald never missed an opportunity to remind me of my place. At Christmas dinners, he'd talk about David's successful engineering career and his 6-figure salary. At Emma's birthday parties, he'd show up in his new Mercedes and comment on my aging Nova. When we visited their home, he'd make sure I saw the renovations, the new pool, the imported furniture. "Must be nice," he'd say, "to not have to worry about these things. To live simply. Less stress, I imagine." Sarah would apologize later. "I don't know why he's like this." I did. Gerald Pemberton measured men by their possessions and their titles. In his world, I was a failure who'd trapped his daughter in mediocrity. He had no idea I attended every shareholders' meeting under a numbered company name. He had no idea I could outvote him on any decision. He had no idea that the small investors who occasionally blocked his expansion plans were me. I kept it quiet for 40 years. Why? partly because of Grandpa's letter. The people who respect you for what you own aren't worth keeping. I wanted Sarah to love me for me, not for my bank account. And she did. She never complained about our modest house or our 10-year-old cars. She never pressured me to ask her father for favors. But there was another reason. I wanted Emma to grow up with the right values. Every time Gerald flaunted his wealth, every time he made snide remarks about limited means, Emma was watching. She saw how her grandfather treated people he considered beneath him. She saw how her grandmother stayed silent. And she saw how her mother and I built a life based on love and partnership, not money and status. Emma turned out beautifully. She studied nursing at University of Toronto, worked at Sick Kids Hospital, married a good man named James who taught high school history. They lived in a modest condo in Mississauga and were genuinely happy. Gerald was polite to James, but I could see the disappointment in his eyes. Another mediocre son-in-law, another missed opportunity for his family to climb higher. Then came last October. Sarah and I had been married 39 years. I was 63, thinking about retirement from the plant. Sarah had retired from Children's Aid 2 years earlier and was volunteering at a women's shelter. Gerald called on a Tuesday evening. "Thomas," he said, his voice carrying that familiar tone of forced courtesy. "I'm having a dinner this Saturday. Family dinner. Patricia and I would like you and Sarah to come. 7 o'clock. We'll be there," I said. "Good. I have something I'd like to discuss with you. An opportunity." I knew that tone. Gerald never offered opportunities out of kindness. Saturday arrived. Sarah wore a nice dress she'd bought at Winners. I wore the same sport coat I'd owned for 15 years, pressed and clean. We drove to Caledon in our 2015 Honda Accord, a car Gerald had once described as practical, I suppose. The house looked the same, maybe bigger. They'd added a conservatory since our last visit. Gerald answered the door in a cashmere sweater and tailored slacks. "Sarah." "Thomas." "Come in, come in." He kissed Sarah's cheek and shook my hand with that same perfunctory grip. Patricia was in the living room, arranging flowers. She hugged us both warmly. "So lovely to see you. Emma and James are already here." David and his wife, Caroline, arrived shortly after. David was a successful consulting engineer, Caroline a lawyer. They'd recently bought a house in Oakville, worth $2 million. Gerald made sure everyone knew. Dinner was catered. Some trendy Toronto company that specialized in farm-to-table cuisine. The dining room table could have seated 12. The chandelier above it probably cost more than my car. Gerald sat at the head of the table, naturally. Patricia at the other end. The rest of us arranged along the sides. The conversation flowed around company news, David's latest project, Caroline's case that might go to the Supreme Court. "And how's the factory, Thomas?" Gerald asked, cutting into his beef Wellington. "Same as always," I said. "Still on the floor? You must be, 63 now?" "That's right." He shook his head, smiling. "Remarkable. Most men your age are thinking about retirement, pensions, travel, relaxation." "I'm thinking about it," I said. "But not much of a pension from factory work, I imagine." He said it sympathetically, but everyone at the table heard the judgment underneath. Sarah's hand found mine under the table. "We'll manage," I said. "Well," Gerald set down his fork and folded his hands. "That's actually what I wanted to talk to you about, Thomas. I have a proposal." Here it was. "I'm 73 now," he continued. "Still sharp, still capable, but I'm thinking about the future, about legacy. Pemberton Industrial has been in this family for 50 years. David isn't interested in taking it over. He's built his own career, and I'm proud of that. But I'd like to keep it in the family somehow." He looked at me directly. "I'd like to offer you a position, Thomas." At Pemberton, the table went quiet. "What kind of position?" I asked. "Facilities manager. You'd oversee building maintenance, groundskeeping, basic repairs. Given your background in manufacturing, you'd be qualified. The salary would be $45,000 a year. Better than what you're making now, I'd imagine. And it comes with benefits. A small pension." He smiled. "I know it's not glamorous, but it's steady work. And at your age, with retirement coming, security matters." Sarah's grip on my hand tightened. "Facilities manager," I repeated. "Think of it as semi-retirement, light work, and you'd be part of the Pemberton family business." Finally, he said that last word with particular emphasis. David looked uncomfortable. Caroline studied her wine glass. Patricia's eyes were sad. Emma spoke up. Grandpa, Dad's been a skilled machinist for 40 years. Facilities manager seems... It's a generous offer, Gerald interrupted gently. Sometimes we have to be realistic about our limitations. There's no shame in that. I felt something shift inside me. 40 years of condescension, 40 years of quiet insults, 40 years of watching this man treat me like I was lucky to be tolerated. I'd been patient, I'd been methodical, but patience has a purpose, and that purpose was about to be fulfilled. That's very generous, Gerald, I said, but I need to decline. His eyebrows rose. Decline? Yes. I'm not interested in the position. He set down his wine glass slowly. Thomas, I'm not sure you understand. This is a real opportunity. At your age, with your background, you're not going to find better. I appreciate the concern, I said, but I'm quite comfortable with my current situation. Current situation? He almost laughed. You're a 63-year-old factory worker living in a house worth maybe $400,000, driving a 10-year-old Honda. Sarah deserves better. She's always deserved better. Sarah stood up. Dad, that's enough. I'm trying to help. Gerald's voice rose. I've watched for 40 years while Thomas kept you in that tiny house. That mediocre life. I've never said anything because you seemed happy, but happiness doesn't pay the bills when you're 70 and your pension barely covers groceries. We're fine, Sarah said, her voice shaking. You're not fine. You're scraping by, and you always have been, because Thomas lacks ambition, lacks drive. I'm offering him a chance to finally contribute to this family's success, and he's too proud to take it. I stood up too, calmly, slowly. Gerald, may I use your computer, just for a moment? He blinked. What? Your computer. In your office. I need to show you something. He stared at me. Thomas, what are you talking about? It'll just take a minute. Then you'll understand why I'm declining your offer. The confusion on his face was worth 40 years of patience. We walked to his office, the whole family following. Gerald's office was exactly what you'd expect. Mahogany desk, leather chair, walls covered with photos of himself shaking hands with politicians and business leaders. He logged into his computer, still looking baffled. Pull up the Pemberton Industrial Shareholder Registry, I said. Why would I? Just do it, please. He clicked through to the company's investor relations portal, entering his credentials. The shareholder list appeared on the screen. Now, I said, look at the largest shareholders. He scrolled down. His name appeared at the top. Gerald Pemberton, 48%. Then a series of numbered companies. 2157489, Ontario Limited. 329846, 7 Ontario Limited. 441283, 9 Ontario Limited, and several others. Together, they held 51% of voting shares. Those numbered companies, I said. Click on the corporate registry information. He did, his hands moving mechanically. The beneficial owner of all of them appeared on the screen. Thomas Andrew Whitmore. The color drained from his face. What is this? I've been the majority shareholder in your company for 39 years, Gerald, since before I married your daughter. The office was absolutely silent. That's impossible, he whispered. My grandfather left me an inheritance when I was 20. I invested it carefully. I bought shares in Pemberton Industrial gradually through holding companies. I now control 51% of the voting shares, which means every major decision you've made in the last 4 decades required my approval. I let that sink in. The expansion into Quebec you wanted in 1995? I voted against it. Too risky. The merger with Carlson Manufacturing in 2003? I blocked it. Bad deal. The dividend increase you proposed last year? I approved it because it benefited the small shareholders. Gerald sat down heavily in his chair. You've been running this company well, I continued. I never interfered with day-to-day operations, but I made sure you didn't make catastrophic mistakes. And I made sure the company stayed ethical. When you wanted to outsource to that factory in Bangladesh with questionable labor practices, I stopped that. When you wanted to cut the employee pension plan, I voted it down. His mouth opened and closed. No sound came out. So when you ask if I'm comfortable with my current situation, the answer is yes. My net worth is approximately $98 million. The house you think is mediocre? I could buy 10 of your houses without financing. The car you mock? I could buy a Ferrari dealership. I leaned against his desk. But I don't. Because my grandfather taught me that money is a tool, not a trophy. I worked at that factory because I enjoyed the work and the people. I lived in that house because it was a home, not a status symbol. And I never told Sarah because I wanted her to love me for who I am, not what I have. Sarah was crying. Emma had her hand over her mouth. You spent 40 years judging me, I said. Measuring me by your standards. Treating me like I was lucky to be tolerated. And all that time, I was protecting your company from your worst impulses. Gerald's hands were shaking. The facilities manager position you offered? $45,000 a year? I make more than that in dividend income every month. I didn't need your charity, Gerald. I never did. He looked up at me, and for the first time in 40 years, I saw something other than condescension in his eyes. Fear. Are you going to take the company? He asked hoarsely. Remove me? I thought about it. God knows I'd imagined this moment. But then I looked at Sarah, tears streaming down her face. I looked at Emma, shock and pride mixing in her expression. I looked at Patricia, who was quietly crying into her napkin. No, I said. You built this company. You've run it well, despite your flaws. I'm not going to take that away from you. Relief washed over his face. But things are going to change, I continued. First, you're going to apologize to Sarah, a real apology, for 40 years of making her feel like she married beneath her. He nodded quickly. Second, you're going to apologize to Emma and James, for treating them with the same condescension you showed me. Another nod. Third, you're going to establish a scholarship fund at the company. $1 million to start, funding education for employees' children. You're going to announce it at the next shareholders meeting and credit it as a way to give back to the people who built this company. Yes, of course. And fourth, I said quietly, you're going to learn that a man's worth isn't measured by his job title, or his car, or the size of his house. It's measured by how he treats people, how he loves, how he contributes to the world. I straightened up. Can you do that, Gerald? He looked at me for a long moment. Then, slowly, he nodded. I'm sorry, he said, his voice cracking. I'm so sorry, Thomas. You're right, about all of it. Sarah came to my side and took my hand. She was still crying, but she was smiling too. Why didn't you tell me? She whispered. Because I wanted you to know that I would have loved you the same if I had nothing, that our life together wasn't about money, it was about us. She kissed me then, right there in front of everyone, and I felt the weight of 40 years lift off my shoulders. The drive home was quiet. Sarah held my hand across the center console, occasionally squeezing it, occasionally wiping tears away. I can't believe you kept that secret for so long, she finally said. I'm sorry if it hurt you. It didn't hurt me. She laughed wetly. I'm processing. All this time, we could have been miserable, I finished, worrying about money changing us, wondering if people liked us or for what we had, living in a mansion that felt empty instead of a home that felt full. She was quiet for a moment. Would you change anything? I thought about our tiny kitchen where we'd cooked thousands of meals together, our small living room where we'd watched Emma grow up, our modest bedroom where we'd spent 40 years falling asleep in each other's arms. Not a single thing, I said. She squeezed my hand again. Emma called the next day. Dad, I just want you to know what you did, keeping that secret, teaching me and Mom to value the right things. That's the greatest gift you could have given us. You would have turned out wonderfully either way, I said. Maybe. But I wouldn't have learned what really matters. James and I were talking last night. We're happy, Dad, really happy. And it's because we learned from you and Mom that happiness doesn't come from having more. It comes from being more. After I hung up, I sat in my small workshop in the basement, surrounded by my tools and half-finished projects. And I felt something close to perfect contentment. Gerald kept his word. The scholarship fund was announced. He apologized to Sarah privately, and she chose to forgive him. Their relationship isn't perfect now, but it's better, more honest. He still runs Pemberton Industrial, and he does it well. I still attend shareholders' meetings under my numbered company name, but I rarely have to intervene. He's more careful now, more thoughtful. David called me a month after the dinner. Uncle Thomas, he said. He'd never called me that before, always just Thomas. I wanted to apologize, too. I saw how Dad treated you, And I never stood up for you. That was cowardly. You were protecting your relationship with your father, I said. I understand that. Still, you're a better man than any of us gave you credit for. I'm just a machinist who got lucky with an inheritance, I said. No, David said quietly. You're the wisest person in this family. I retired from the plant 3 months later. There was a small party, cake in the break room, handshakes from guys I'd worked beside for decades. None of them knew I could have bought the whole company. None of them treated me any differently than they had on my first day. That meant everything. Sarah and I still live in our small house in Georgetown. We still drive our Honda. We travel now, carefully planned trips, nothing extravagant, and we volunteer at the women's shelter together. The money sits in investment accounts, growing quietly, doing its work. We donate generously to causes we believe in, always anonymously. We've established trust funds for any grandchildren Emma might have, structured to teach them the value of work before they receive anything. And every morning, I wake up next to Sarah in our modest bedroom, sunlight filtering through curtains we bought 20 years ago, and I feel wealthy beyond measure. Because here's what I learned, what my grandfather tried to teach me, what I hope I've passed on to Emma. Money is a tool, not a measure of your worth. Success isn't what you own, it's who you are when nobody's watching. Real wealth is loving deeply, living honestly, and knowing that you're enough exactly as you are. Gerald spent 40 years thinking I was poor. He was wrong. I was rich the whole time. I just measured wealth differently than he did, and that, in the end, made all the difference.